Support for This News is So Gay comes from the LGBTQ Opportunity Fund of the Cleveland Foundation, leveraging philanthropy to empower LGBTQ communities. Welcome to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck, editor of The Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ newsroom. Thanks so much for joining us. Here's what we've got coming up on this week's episode. We are only a few days into 2026, but what are some of the 2025 LGBTQ stories that we are carrying with us into this new year? The removal of LGBTQ public displays is apparently still a priority for local governments. Where is the latest rainbow crosswalk drama? There are LGBTQ folks in the news that you may not know about, but you soon will in our latest round of Who the Heck Is That? And of course, queer joy. Where is our roundtable finding queer joy in the news right now? Joining us this week to answer those questions and so many more, publisher and president of Dallas Voice in Out North Texas, the premier media source for LGBTQ Texas, and also the co-chair of the National LGBT Media Association, Leo Cusimano. Leo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much. We really appreciate you having me on.
Thrilled to have you here. Editor-in-chief of Watermark Out News, Central Florida and Tampa Bay's leading LGBTQ news source, Ryan Williams-Jent. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
I feel like everyone should have premier in their title. So I will say now, and returning to the show, LGBTQ beat reporter at the 19th, one of the premier publications of my heart, Kate Sossin. Kate, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again. Always a thrill to be here.
Kate, as the veteran, you will be carrying the lion's share of the weight of... No, that's not true, Kate. We're just happy to have you here. We're just happy to have you here.
No pressure.
Our LGBTQ Reporters Roundtable is now assembled, so let's dive in. So before we jump into some of the latest news, let's look back as we look ahead, and especially because we have two new panelists on this week's episode. Ryan, I would love to start with you. What was one of those big watermark stories of 2025 that we should know about as we move in to 2026?
I think it's interesting and maybe a little unfortunate that some of what I'm going to talk about, we have to talk about going into 2026 as well, because the first thing that comes to mind is the Florida Department of Transportation targeting inclusive asphalt art across the state. Florida, as it always does, leads the nation in shame, unfortunately. What the Florida Department of Transportation really did is not only target, crosswalks, but installations throughout our entire coverage area. So we are Tampa Bay, Central Florida, which is, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Sarasota, obviously Orlando. And so we saw one by one either cities start to remove things in advance or be given an ultimatum and ultimately remove those things. Like don't say gay or trans, like so many other policies that sort of really took an international spotlight from Florida. We've seen it grow outside of Florida and continue. But yeah, that was just really huge for all of our readers across the board.
And by the way, I was today years old when I first heard the phrase inclusive asphalt art. I've never even heard that phrase before, and I'm going to incorporate it into everything we do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. Leo, how about for you, as you look back at 2025, what was a big LGBTQ Texas story that we definitely shouldn't forget about?
Well, looking back at 2025, one of the biggest LGBTQ Texas stories wasn't just one event. I think it was how our community faced an unprecedented legislative attack while showing up for one another. From the record-breaking number of LGBT bills, there was over 200 filed, but only 7 passed in this legislative session, to the huge grassroots marches and powerful pride celebrations this year. This year showed both how fierce the opposition is and how resilient our queer Texas community remains to fight and the spirit should not be forgotten. It's really amazing to see. We've had so many different smaller rural cities celebrating Pride this year. I mean, and we sponsor every single one of them. But the community has come out to really show up for one another.
I love that. Kate, obviously, you are covering the entire nation. What's one of those 2025 stories that you covered that we're definitely not done with for 2026?
It's hard to pick one. Where do you start? It was such a big year for LGBTQ plus news. I covered the nation with my colleague Orion Rumler, who does a lot of health news. So I'm going to pick one that is not within the health realm, and say that one story that we're going to see a lot of is about trans athletes in sports. So coming next week, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case involving two trans athletes, Lindsay Hecox and Becky Pepper Jackson, two girls who are fighting for the right to continue to participate in athletics. And they're both interesting in that they don't fit conservative talking points for sports. Becky never underwent male puberty. She transitioned before, and Lindsay tried out for her track and field team and didn't make it. She's in club sports, but they're trying to ban them anyway from sports. And these cases are really important for trans athletes, but they're also important for trans people generally, because if you can ban trans people from sports on a basis that is not even medical or logical, can you ban trans people from all areas of public life? Which is a question that we see over and over and over again. And so this case is just going to be really huge for trans people in general. And that's a case that we're going to be looking at, because a lot of people think it's a fairness issue. But if we get down to the science of it, it's just completely illogical. So that's the case that I'm following most closely right now. And I'm really curious to see what the arguments are.
Kate, are you going to the Supreme Court?
I am not. I was planning to, but I will not be going.
I've never done that before. That would be quite an experience. Well, we will certainly keep our eyes on all of that. And with the myriad actual issues facing this world, local governments are still apparently prioritizing the removal of LGBTQ plus related public displays, or as I like to call it, inclusive asphalt art. I'm just going to keep saying it until I normalize it. Leo, what is going on with the rainbow crosswalks in San Antonio, Texas?
Well, it's a big fight in San Antonio this year. Rainbow crosswalks, which really for everybody is symbols of LGBT pride and has been for years. It has become the center of a statewide fight, a big statewide fight. The state denied the city's request to have them, and they're forcing their removal next month. And the community is responding with both frustration, but also creativity by planning rainbow sidewalk art in their place. So it's been a broader movement here in Texas where LGBT visibility on public streets has been challenged by state transportation orders. And this has really angered our community, saying the state's actions are more political rather than safety driven. In fact, the North Texas LGBT Chamber of Commerce confirmed in their studies that less accidents on streets happen with rainbow crosswalks. Even Dallas Voice has gotten in the anti-erasure movement. I was out there last month painting our racks rainbow. and I tell you, it's been amazing to see how many storefronts are now painting rainbow everywhere. It's really exploded in rainbows in Dallas.
By the way, you completely stole my thunder. My next question literally was, did I read that publisher and president of Dallas Voice was out there painting newsstands? And indeed, you were out there yourself painting newsstands. I absolutely love that. Ryan, over in St. Petersburg, Florida, they've gone a different route. This was a positive story, right?
Yeah, the response to so many of our street murals and installations being removed has been pretty positive. It has brought folks together. One of the ways that that's happened recently is the city of St. Petersburg, which is actually where I live, installed pride-colored bike racks. They did so out of their longstanding public bike rack program. This is obviously city funding, city property, and they installed it near the Progressive Pride street mural. So, well, where it was, which we haven't painted any of our newspaper stands or anything here, but we did actually help paint that mural back in 2020. So it was sad to see it go. But one of the things I want to mention and that I love so much about St. Petersburg and Tampa Bay and so many of our Central Florida locations as well, Florida sometimes gets a very bad rap. We have a lot of strong folks in the community in certain areas of the state, really everywhere. But St. Petersburg actually has the largest pride in the state. These bike racks were installed in its birthplace, St. Pete Pride. What I want to mention is that they are the Progressive Pride colors. So it's your traditional red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. But to represent the more marginalized members of our community, people of color and trans folks, it does include, the colors of the trans flag as well as black and brown. And I think that's so important because I don't think that anyone is really facing any more ire of the federal and state governments really than the trans folks, and especially trans people of color. So I love so much that the city took that extra, 5 more racks, just to showcase, that everyone is supported in this community.
We have Leo out there painting newsstands. Ryan's out there painting murals. Kate, it strikes me that these public acts of LGBTQ plus, certainly visibility, but also defiance, all of that made me think of this new exhibit that you wrote about at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. Can you talk a little bit about that exhibit and what that has to teach us in this area of public defiance?
Yeah, this story really captivated me because, I'm I guess, kind of Jewish person in that parts of my family are Jewish. And I've always thought about Holocaust history as something that relates to being Jewish, but I never really remember that it's something that relates to being LGBTQ plus. And this new exhibit, it's Holocaust and World War II, focuses on the events between 1933 and 1945, includes history about LGBTQ plus people, and in particular, a non-binary person by the name of Fritz Kitzing, who's a non-binary person who was 27 when the Nazis came to power and was just unabashedly themselves, kind of trans feminine person, and was arrested for dressing in women's clothing, having relationships with men, and just beautiful images of this person, even though they are the images of them being arrested, is part of this. And I learned so much about all of the LGBTQ plus people who were victims of the Holocaust and what that looked like through doing this reporting and looking at this exhibit and the pink triangles and also the other designations that were given to Holocaust victims who were LGBTQ plus, and realizing the similarities. And they did this exhibit on purpose for today because they think that there's a link between today and World War II. And just looking at these histories was really enlightening to me as a queer person to see the history of queer people within this. And one of the things that I learned that I think was so difficult was that there's not a single story that they can find of a straight person going out of their way or risking their lives to help an LGBTQ person. That LGBTQ people really saved themselves during this history. Which they did, and they did stand, in their truth. But Jake Newsom, who I interviewed from the Pink Triangle Legacies Project, said, "I have not found one single instance of a straight person risking, helping, protecting a queer and trans person during this history. Not a single one, and that's a hard pill to swallow." And that just really sat with me. And it really communicated to me the importance of allies standing up in this moment. So I learned a lot by doing this story.
We're going to all have to go together to go see that exhibit at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. I think travel-wise, logistically, Ryan, if you want to pick me up on the way there, Leo, you're a little out of the way. Just meet us there, and that'll be fine. That'll be fine. All right. Well, we now return to one of my favorite games. This is why I'm fun at parties. The game is called Who the Heck Is That? This is where we bounce around and have our roundtable tell us about LGBTQ plus folks about whom you may not have ever heard, but you should certainly know their name. Leo, let's start with you. Who the heck is the Reverend Rachel Griffin Allison.
Well, thank you so much. Rachel Griffin Allison is a Dallas-based, openly queer Methodist pastor. And she's also an LGBTQ activist who's become one of the loudest faith voices pushing back against anti-LGBTQ policies in Texas. She shows up with her collar to remind lawmakers that hate isn't holy and that queer people belong in both church and community. She is also, believe it or not, my next door neighbor.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And she was recently named the Dallas Voice LGBT Person of the Year for 2025. She really does disrupt the narrative. She has painted the steps of this iconic Dallas church located at the gateway of our community in Rainbow, and she has received national coverage from talk show hosts to national media. She is really a powerhouse in our community.
Amazing. Ken Schneck beat out again for Dallas LGBTQ Person of the Year. It's starting to hurt. I should probably, step foot in Texas at some point. Round 1 is done. Let's go to round 2. Kate, who the heck is Tara Asghar?
Tara is a really interesting person. She is an immigrant from Bangladesh. She left after 2016. Anti-LGBTQ extremists broke into an apartment where she was with 2 friends. Both of her friends were murdered. One was a publisher of an LGBTQ plus magazine, and the other was also an out LGBTQ plus person. She managed to escape, and she came and has told her story since of surviving as a queer gender nonconforming person. And I talked to her for a story about the history of LGBTQ plus immigration. And the reason why I was interested in this story is because, like a lot of people, I think I had been under the impression that being LGBTQ affords you additional legal protection in the United States, that sometimes it can be a gateway for immigration, and that is the case, but largely historically, being LGBTQ was a reason why people were denied immigration. And I wanted to talk about that history and why we have discriminated against LGBTQ plus people in immigration and used the fact that they were gay, bisexual, queer, transgender, intersex, or what have you, as a reason for denying them entry into our country, and how we continue to make it so difficult for LGBTQ plus people to immigrate or to claim asylum, and why that is. And so the homophobia of the system continues and is longstanding. And so Tara kind of talks to us about this history and what it's like to come to a country where you're not really wanted as a trans person.
The piece is called Immigrating While Queer. America has a complex history of exclusion. It is an incredible piece. Everyone must check that out. Round 2 is done. Our final round. Ryan, who the heck was Addison Taylor?
Addison Taylor was a beloved entertainer in Orlando who was celebrated really across the country. She died on December 14th, unexpectedly at 41. And the entire community has just been grieving since then, but also celebrating what an impact Addison made. So Addison co-owned A&R Productions. They produce the National Miss Comedy Queen pageant, which folks may or may not know, there are like preliminaries all across the country. If you are a Drag Race fan, there are several Drag Race winners over the years. I believe they've been doing it for about 20 years now, the pageant. And, that pageant is really a celebration of drag and queer identity and joy, finding that comedy, that so many drag entertainers provide us. And she was an essential part of that, which really just speaks to who she was and why folks really miss the light that she brought to them. She also was an advocate who worked at Harmony Healthcare. And I really would just like to read what they shared about Addison, which is, Addison transformed our team in so many ways. They will be remembered for the energy they brought into a room, their sense of humor, and the way they made others feel seen and heard. Addison always spoke with courage and care for all communities and raised the bar for what it means to be a Harmony team member. And they vowed that Addison will be present in all of their work going forward. And I think that, that's true for a lot of folks in Central Florida and outside of Central Florida who knew and loved her.
One of the reasons that I love doing this show is because I get to read my colleagues' writing from across the country. And so often I will read a piece and say, nope, definitely couldn't have written that one. And this was also one of those pieces where you did such an amazing job, Ryan, in writing that obituary. And I had to remind myself I had never met Addison because I certainly felt like I had after reading your piece. So thank you for that. You are listening to This News is So Gay. I'm your host, Ken Schneck from the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ plus newsroom. Joining me this week, Leo Cusimano from Dallas Voice, Ryan Williams-Jent from Watermark Out News, and Kate Sossin from the 19th. By the by, if you are not subscribed to This News is So Gay, what the heck are you waiting for? Subscribe to this podcast right this very second on your favorite podcasting app so that new episodes automatically make their way to you. Well, it is time, folks. It is time for Glitter Bomb. This is where our roundtable shares stories of queer joy that they are seeing covered in the news or that they just want to shout out in their own life. I've learned to add that now because people are just sharing personal stuff, which is fine by me. So let's set off a Glitter Bomb. Leo, let's start with you. Give us a story of queer joy that you are seeing out there in the world.
What really stands out to me is this. Despite everything, queer people are still falling in love, starting families, throwing parties, building art, and really showing up for one another. That kind of joy doesn't always make the breaking news feeds, but it's absolutely shaping our culture. And for us in LGBT media, this local reporting is very important. I think it's our responsibility to share these voices, and we do. And it's just, to me, that's where the joy is today.
Love it. Ryan Williams-Jent, give us a story of queer joy.
Orlando will not let their LGBTQ queer light dim either. And in the last couple of weeks, Orlando City Commissioners Robert Stewart and Patty Sheehan painted rainbows in medians on bike trails in Orlando because that is city property. One of the crosswalks that was removed in Florida was, of course, at Pulse. And that is an ongoing story drawing, international attention because of the location, obviously. Pulse being a space that means so much to all of, everyone in our community, I think, but certainly Orlando, that's their backyard, So a lot of these commissioners, Patty Sheehan in particular, was a big part of the response to Pulse. And she and Robert Stewart took it upon themselves to paint more rainbows. And I know that they won't be the last of the new rainbows that are painted in Orlando as well.
There you go. Kate Sossin, how about a queer joy story from you?
I've been digging out through emails today because we're back on after taking a long break. And one of the emails that I came across was from the Movement Advancement Project, or MAP, which is an LGBTQ organization that tracks legislation and policy. And I saw a stat that just really hit me, which was that 700 anti-LGBTQ plus bills were introduced last year. And of those, 88% of them failed. And I thought that was like a really nice statistic to see, which meant that overwhelmingly these attempts to write us out of existence fail. And so even though there's a lot of noise about them, I think it's really comforting to me to know that the appetite for them hasn't changed. People don't want them. Not even the legislatures that are so conservative want them.
I do want to see a study, even though this is the queer joy section. I also want to see a study on the pro-LGBTQ plus bills, because I know that here in Ohio, we have 8 currently on the table and none is even remotely scheduled for a hearing. So I would love to see not only the bad ones fail, but it'd be great to maybe see some of the good ones advance. So something to think about. We're going to feed that over to the MAP project. By the way, Kate, the correct answer was Minneapolis redefining LGBTQ plus rights 50 years ago. That was the queer joy story I thought you were going to go with.
Well, Look, that is a queer joy story, but that happened 50 years ago.
It's where I still am emotionally. Everyone needs to check out a piece Kate wrote.
What are you working on now? I did that weeks ago.
Which brings us to our last question for the panelists, and it is indeed, what are you working on now? So obviously, I'm going to start with Kate. What's coming up for you, including, obviously, the Supreme Court?
I am working on the Supreme Court right now, kind of laser focused on that and just laying out for the year what will be the biggest stories and really trying to figure out a reporting trajectory that is palatable for queer people. Like, I don't want to wake up every morning and read news that makes it difficult to wake up every morning. I want to wake up and read news that is uplifting. And I think there is good news out there for us, and I want to find it and intersperse it with the news that is difficult, because I think we need that for some stamina to get through the year.
Yeah, we have definitively walked away with that now at the Buckeye Flame. When we added that queer joy vertical at the beginning of last year and really dedicated ourselves to populating it with actual stories, we thought it was just going to be a one-off that maybe people would care about every other one or every fifth one. And it's incredible how the appetite for those happier stories, we are now convinced. We weren't totally convinced in 2024. Now we are absolutely convinced that people are really craving those queer joy stories. So we will join you in that, Kate. Leo, how about for you? What's coming up at the Dallas Voice and out North Texas?
Well, I really want to share a story. And, for us here, we're going into a news desert. So beyond sustainability, one of the biggest things that we strive for is impact. We got a grant from Press Forward, and we saw just that. We received a grant to go into a news desert, and after our initial outreach, we have hired a reporter to have that as her beat to go into East Texas. And soon after that, we received a letter to the editor from this man living in that news desert, and he shared something deeply personal. He spoke about his feelings, about feeling completely alone, struggling, even considering ending his life. Then he picked up a copy of Dallas Voice. In those pages, he found something that he hadn't found in a long time, a connection. He realized there was a whole community out there, people just like him, stories that resonated. In addition, he found a therapist, and that moment changed everything for him. He credits Dallas Voice for saving his life. And this is really the why of what we do every day. This is, when we got this and we published it in Dallas Voice, I sat down with my team and I'm like, this is why we do what we do. And it was really emotional for us to get this and to understand that that's how important it is to support local and national LGBT media out there. It's just so vitally important today, and that's what I'm working on.
Hey, funders, if you're listening, please stop asking us first how many clicks on the website and ask us first the actual impact of stories, because we really do have these tales at the ready, and it feels a lot better to share those. Ryan, how about for you? What's coming up at Watermark Out News?
It kind of all goes together because when 2025 started, I think our community was really on edge, and I think a lot of us still are. And so last year, we introduced a feature called the Good Page. It ran in every issue of the year, dedicated just to positive news. LGBTQ stories about local folks in our community who are making a difference, who are celebrating a milestone, maybe they got married. Maybe their small business just celebrated a decade. Different social groups that have popped up. Folks who are working to elevate minorities within minorities. There are so many wonderful stories that have come out of it over the last year that we knew going into 2026 that we absolutely had to continue it. And so the Good Page will continue throughout the year. And it gets such a wonderful response. And it's, even if no one read it, we would know that there's joy out there, just from talking to the folks that we highlight, which, the more we can amplify joy, I think the more of it we'll have. So I'm so excited to continue that.
This is like our 2026 resolutions episode. I absolutely love it. But sadly, my friends, that's all the time that we have for this week's episode. We have to get out there and go create, yes, inclusive asphalt art. I want to thank our roundtable publisher, president, Dallas Voice, out North Texas, Leo Cusimano. Leo, what a pleasure having you on.
Well, gratitude's one of my core values, and I just want to say thank you so much, Ken. It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Oh, I love 2026 already. Editor-in-chief of Watermark Out News, Ryan Williams-Jent. Ryan, thank you.
Thank you. I am planning some inclusive asphalt art in your honor as we speak, and can't wait to see you again.
That sounds like a memorial, so I don't know if I'm into that one. But also LGBTQ plus beat reporter at the 19th, back from winter break, Kate Sossin. Kate, welcome back and good luck with the Supreme Court coverage.
Thank you so very much. Happy 2026.
To us all. I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame. And if you liked this episode of This News is So Gay, please share it with a friend. Subscribe so that you do not miss out on our next episode. Send an email on over to editor@thebuckeyeflame.com. That's me, to let us know your thoughts, and rate and review us on your favorite podcasting app. This News is So Gay is a product of the Buckeye Flame, a nonprofit newsroom. Become a recurring donor today. We call them Fireflies, for as little as $12.50 a month, which truly enables programming just like this. In the meantime, read LGBTQ plus news, share the stories of LGBTQ plus reporters, and support the work of LGBTQ plus newsrooms. Until next week, friends.